let's talk about the problem with measurement. If we go with field goal percentage or points, right? Neither of these allow you to compare the efficiency of different types of shots. So we can just say, over the whole game, I scored 20 points, or, I shot 40% of all my shots, twos and threes, and, whatever, most of that's mixed together. Maybe you could say twos or threes, they have a different percentage, but you don't actually know the value of each of those in relation to each other. And so you might know that you got 20 points. You might know that you shot pretty well, but you don't really know what that means on a shot by shot basis or a different type of shot, a comparison basis. So points per shot value is the solution to this problem. Just like field goal percentage is calculated by your total number of made shots divided by your total number of attempted shots, points per shot value is calculated by your total number of points without including free throws, because we're just talking about field goals for now, and divided by your field goal attempts. So points divided by attempts instead of made shots divided by attempts. And this gives you a lot of different intelligence. So it really is the best measure of efficiency. How efficiently did you score? And for a team, like for coaches, I talk to them about analyzing specific plays. Like we love this one out of bounds play, but it might produce, 0.5 points per shot. And if we just get the ball in and run our normal half court set offense, then we score 1 point per shot. And so why are we spending all this time trying to perfect this one out of bounds play that your coach found on YouTube when it's not working for us? And it can also go to specific shots, which is what we're going to get to by the end of today. How do layups versus threes versus mid-ranges, mid-range versus layups, contested versus uncontested. How can we analyze different types of shots and really give ourselves a priority list of what we're trying to get? And then compare my 2-point shot versus my 3-point shot. Like over the course of a season, that can be really telling. I actually make more on my threes than I do on my mid-range twos. And so if I have the chance, I should actually back up and shoot a 3-point shot. And on free throws. So if we take free throws as a separate category, the goal here is to equate everything to a 2-point shot possession. So that's why this really works, is that we can calculate our 3 points and divide it in such a way that it's the same equivalent as if it was a 2-point possession, and show how much more that third point added to our efficiency of scoring points for the number of shots. So free throws, we just take 2 free throws as a chunk and calculate that because it's the equivalent of a 2-point shot. And so we can look at, if you score 50% on your free throws, because they're worth 1 point each time you make it, you're still going to average 1 point for every 2 shots at the free throw line you take. And so that's why it's very easy to get an advantage by getting fouled by the other team, is that every time you go to the free throw line, if you're above 50% as a free throw shooter, which you probably are at this point in your career, then, it's just icing on the cake. You're scoring way higher efficiency at the free throw line than your whole team ever has, the whole season from their average field goal attempt. And so, that's kind of the math behind the cliche statement everybody says, free throws win games. Is like, mathematically, the more you're fouled, the more chances you have to get the same number of points. So a lot, like twice as many shot attempts means a lower percentage actually equates to still an equal or even higher points per shot value. So we're going to break that down more. This gold standard for points per shot value, this is why I really like it, because the math, once you understand it, is very simple to tell, what's good, what's bad. So 1 point per shot is the gold standard. That's what we're trying to get to all the time. And you'll see teams that are below that and, they struggle, and teams that are above that are in the playoffs and winning championships. And it's very, very small decimal differences that actually equate to a big overall performance difference. And so you can pretty quickly do the math here. If we want to get 1 point per shot, then on a 2-point shot, we need 50% on average. And on a 3-point shot, we only need 33%. And this is what I call the green light standard. You probably heard the term green light shooter. It means that coach says take threes whenever you have the chance because you're good at making threes. And, they kind of use their eyeball test or who knows what to actually give a green light to shooters. They don't really understand the math behind it, but this is my level. Is like you're averaging 1 point per shot. If you can do that or better, then we want you to take more threes. If you're not getting 33% or better, then we probably don't want you taking threes, and we need you to do something else to get us a more efficient shot. And then it changes based on the level of competition. The level of offensive ability goes up as you go to high school to college to NBA. And I just did a big study. We're going to see some shot charts here in a minute of the current year Celtics in 23-24. They are averaging 1.15 points per shot compared to the rest of the NBA is right around 1.0. So that means over an NBA game, they get about 100 possessions. Why they score over 100 points very often. It's a longer game. They're playing fast with the shot clock and so forth. But this equates to 15 points. 100 shots taken. If we're averaging 1.15 points per shot, that means we're scoring 115 points on average. Compared to everybody else scoring 100, we're going to win most of the games just on that calculation. And then, if we look at high school, we're usually in the 0.6 to 0.8, not very good at scoring. We have a slower game, no shot clock, less experienced players, less strategic coaches, and, just overall not as skilled yet at scoring. And college is a little bit higher, about 0.8 to 1.0. And so, in my mind, I want to get to that 1.0 because it's a nice round number. These numbers break down to really good performance metrics. And so then if you're playing high school and everybody else is averaging in here and your own team is averaging in here, but you're scoring this, then you're worth 20% more than anybody else taking a shot on your team. Therefore, you're going to have the green light to shoot and you're going to be able to feel the added value you bring to every possession. Whether you miss a shot or not, you understand that your average value is very high efficiency per shot. And my favorite way to really highlight that is, kind of thinking about the shooter psychology. I like to ask the question, if you are a 3-point shooter and you missed 6 out of 9 shots in a game, like let's say it was even the first 6, right? You took 9 threes over the whole game, but the first 6 you missed in a row. I took 6 threes, maybe in the first 3 quarters of the game. I took 2 shots per quarter and I missed all 6 of them. And most players would feel like a complete failure and not even take another shot for the rest of that game. And even by the end of the game, if they made the last 3, maybe they made a comeback in the 4th quarter, they hit 3 3-pointers in a row to wrap out the game. And what they're going to remember is the 6 misses, because every shooter feels the pain of a miss way more than they feel the celebration of a make. And so what I try to point out is that the 3 shots you made times 3 points gave you 9 points. The 6 misses plus the 3 makes was 9 shot attempts, and therefore you just got 1 point per shot on average, and you're a green light shooter and should keep shooting those shots. And it can dramatically change how you perceive your own shooting performance. Again, most shooters, if I saw you in a game where you had missed 6 shots out of 9, you would feel terrible about yourself and be questioning your life and, wanting to quit basketball maybe. Like you'd be, again, feeling out of control and feeling that volatility of performance where I would just come to you and say, hey, I tracked your shots and actually you made 9 points out of 9 shots. So you're doing perfect and you should keep shooting. The team aspect, it doesn't matter that we have a really high or really low points per shot value. The big difference maker is the differential between the offense and defense. So if we can score 0.8 points per shot in high school, but keep the other team scoring only 0.6 points per shot, then we're still going to win by about 20 points, right? Given a given a 100-shot game, which is not as likely. In high school, it's more like 60 possession game for each team. But regardless, the same math still works. The Celtics are a great example again. That's why I really did a study this week of this to really dig into, how they're operating. And they average 1.15 and hold their opponents to an average of 1.0. And when they play some of the other higher level playoff teams right now in the West Division, they'll be up in the 1.1 maybe, but the Celtics are still way up at the top at 1.15. And so they're constantly having a more efficient offense that produces a margin. And so if it was they had a bad shooting night and only scored 1.0, if their defense was still doing great and they could hold their opponent down to 0.9, then they would still have a differential and win the game, even if they were not having a great scoring day. And this is, again, why this is the math behind the cliche that defense wins games, is that it's really the difference in efficiency. So even if we're having a terrible scoring night, or maybe we're just a terrible shooting team in general, we could do a lot of work on our defense and just hold our opponents down below where we are so that we constantly have a margin. And that's why people say defense wins games, which I tend to not agree with, but there is an aspect to that. If you need to, you can do the work to hold an opponent down and make sure you have a margin. I think it's easier to have a margin by having really intelligent, fast-paced, and skilled offense. But again, the margin is the important part here. And the margin, the difference between two different types of shots is what I want to bring to you on the individual basis, which we're going to get into more in a minute. But let's look at the Celtics, because like I said, there's a great example of why they are efficient and why this comes about and why it looks this way on a shot chart. So their actual hottest spot is in this corner. For whatever reason, this side and not so much this side, like they're pretty good all the way around the 3-point arc, but for whatever reason, this corner is a particular hot spot for this season Celtics team, 44%, which I'll break down the math of that in a second. But what I want to see here from the whole shot chart, this is their whole season so far, going into the playoffs. They shoot a lot of threes and a lot of deep paint twos and not much else. They are hardly ever taking shots out here. And the question I would ask you to think about is why the highest level performing team in the whole NBA is not taking any mid-range or what we would call long two shots. I'll explain more. So let's talk about the points per shot value. So this is the deep paint. This is the dark blue area where they've taken the most shots. So they can made almost 1,700 out of 2,669 shots. And differential here is even noticeable. They're making 63.7. The rest of the league is averaging 59.9. So they got a margin, even on layups. For whatever reason, their offense is creating better quality shots. So given 63.7%, I just rounded up to 64% to make the math a little simpler for you to follow. But 64% times 2 points for each shot they made that they averaged 64% on, they were getting 2 points when they did make it. That averages out to 1.28 points per shot. That means every time they take a layup, it's worth 1.28. And the rest of their shots that they take all over the rest of the court, the rest of the game, that's not a layup, is pulling that down to the 1.15 we talked about already. That's their actual team average for the season. And so 1.28 means they should be taking more layups whenever they get a chance. And that's one thing they're doing really well at this season. This is above the break threes. So I showed you the corner threes as a separate category. I didn't want to get into all the different segments of the three because I want to keep this a little more high level and get you the basic concept. But 3-point shots, again, they made 370 out of 1,003, 36.9%, just slightly higher than the league. That's pretty average. But at 37% on a 3-point shot, it's not the percentage times 2 anymore, it's the percentage times 3. And so that adds up to 1.11 points per shot value. So It's still above 1.0. It's not quite at 1.15, but it's closer to the 1.28 they got for a layup than anywhere else on the court. And if we had that right corner where it was 44%, if you can think about the calculation, there's 44% times 3 points makes it 1.32 points per shot, which is higher than the layup. And that's where this stat really gets you thinking and makes things crazy. Because if you're shooting 44%, if you're Steph Curry or you're Drew Holiday in that or in particular corner, then you're better off shooting that shot than the rest of the team trying to shoot a layup. And that can dramatically change your mindset when you're on offense. But this is important because the next one shows the mid-range, what we call non-paint twos. So this is everything outside the paint that is not a three-point shot. So between free throw line and three is where they highlighted here to just show this whole category. 44.2%. So again, slightly above the league. They're a skilled team. When they take these shots, they're still making them at a pretty good clip, but this is not a very good shot. This is the same 44% as they shot in that 3-point right corner, but it's only worth 2 points. So now it's a terrible shot because 44% times 2 points is only 0.88, right? And if our average is 1.15 and our layups are 1.28, then every time we take one of these, we are killing our percentage, right? If they flipped the switch and decided to not take any more threes this season and they took all long twos in this space, then they would quickly drop to maybe the bottom of the league efficiency and scoring, and they'd lose their playoff games pretty quickly. And so this is where, if I asked you the question, what's the order of shots you should take? Most people would say layups and then mid-range and then threes. But this is why the game has changed. And if I go back up to this is why this is happening. This is the proof of why this works. And stats have guided a lot of coaches and now a lot of players understand this at the NBA level, especially. When you take threes at a similar percentage of twos, you get 1 point more per shot every time you do so. Even though you're shooting a lower percentage, you make up for it in scoring more points overall.